just to introduce myself, my name's Andy Barber. I'm Android developer here at Just Eat, and I'm going to take you through what's new in Android Q. I ran out of puns, or someone stole my pun actually for the title, so I ended up with this: join the Android Q. Doesn't mean anything, it's just a pun. So let's concentrate on what Android Q is trying to deliver. So this is what Google was saying in their presentations at I/O. It's focusing on user privacy and security, which Scott's going to cover in a minute, and mainly developer productivity. So as you see, there'll be loads of tools to help developers develop apps, and Google have been amazing recently, developing loads and loads of APIs to help developers, and developing the platform tools as well. So these are the topics we're going to cover. Dark theme, which you've just heard about on iOS, so this is the Android equivalent. Gesture navigation, which is the evolution, similar again to iOS, slightly different. There's a new share sheet, which has been a pain point for Android for a while. More notification changes, so that's constantly evolving on Android. There's Nice Bubbles API, which is a common use case, which has got now its official API. And the Jetpack stuff is what I was talking about, developer productivity. These are all the tools that Google now developing to give developers nice APIs to develop great apps. And there's been a load of other updates as well to do with new APIs across the board. So, dark theme. Yes! I had to have a Star Wars reference in there. So, dark theme's been part of Android on an app level, I think, originally. So you had the concept of like just theming your app, but now it's a system-wide toggle. So that's the difference in Android Q. So you can have dark theme or light theme. But you're probably asking why dark theme? So this is what Google are aiming at. The environment is the first one. So if you're in a dark environment and you've got a bright phone shining in your face, it helps in those situations. The big benefit is the battery. Obviously, it's lighting up less pixels, so you're saving on battery. And accessibility is another one I didn't think about, but yeah, there's certain users who benefit from a darker screen, so it's great for accessibility as well. Okay, dark theme implementation. So on the right hand side you can briefly see how it's now in settings, so you select themes, and then display themes, and then light or dark, and it switches it just like so. And also there's a quick settings toggle as well, so if you're familiar with Android, you can drag down from the top, and there's a load of toggles up here, so you've got a toggle up there that you can switch as well on system level. So the three ways of implementing it are theming, which is something that's always been a part of Android, so you can just switch it to standard night-day theme. You can fit it with the OS toggle, so the app will toggle on and off between light and dark, or you can do the third one, which is just toggling certain parts of your app to be light and dark. Number two is force dark. This is a bit of a weird name for it, but basically if you're not implementing one of those themes in number one, you can actually get the OS to force dark mode on your app, and it will kind of work out what the best colours are for your app and render it in the best way it possibly can. There are some exceptions. As I put here, photos sometimes come out a bit strange, and you can enable this on a per activity basis, so you can sort of, it's a kind of a stopgap before you get to number three, which is the custom themes. So if you want to try out dark mode, then you can implement it in your just by switching it on in your styles. And then the third option, which is recommended for like more of a long-term solution, is custom themes. So similar to iOS, you've got your light theme and your dark theme. They're implemented in resource directories, which is slightly different. So in our resources, we use qualifiers at the end. So there's a new one, -night. So you can put in your dark colours in the appropriate folders, and hey presto, dark theme. So this is going to be confusing when you first implement this. So there's some guidelines on the Material Design website. So go there. Again, if you want the links, these are on the slides, and they'll give you some guidance as to what's the best colours to choose, etc. And there's a great Google I/O talk that takes you more in depth. So gesture navigation. I've just done a quick sort of potted history of navigation on Android. So we started out in 2008 with the hard buttons on the left, and then slowly progressed. They're pretty much run along the same common themes. So you've got back, home, and recents, and they've just evolved how it looks. And then in Pi, the recents button disappeared, so you swipe up from here to get to the recents, and it shows like that. So they've tried to kind of progressively evolve the navigation. So in Android Q, we've got something very similar to iOS, but slightly different, as I said. So you swipe up from, you can just about see it, I think, there's a slight bar there. So you swipe up from the bottom to go home, and then the left and the right edges are both back. So I don't think that does it justice, does it, the animation? So yeah, the whole point of it is to push the content edge to edge, and as I said, you've got left and right reserved areas for going back and the bottom. There's obviously problems with this where you've got UI elements on the boundaries of the screen and the bottom. So to get around that, there's something called exclusion rectangles, and all that is basically cutting out a rectangle in those excluded areas so that it's not clashing with your UI element. So if you've got like a scrolling sort of page cross, or you've got some resizable things on the edge of your screen, then that's the best way to get around it, to exclude those rectangles. Oh, actually, one thing I forgot was there are some views that have already got implementations of this, drawer layout and seat bar. I noticed just before the talk that there's another version of drawer layout which has got better implementation of this. So they're constantly evolving it. So new share sheet. This, if you're an Android user, you'll feel the pain here, because the share sheet has always been something that has taken ages to load. So as soon as you tap on share, the actual share inside of it is brilliant, because you can share with all sorts of apps, a lot less restrictive than iOS. But this thing always took ages to load, so there would be this noticeable delay of it coming up, just where it went away and fetched all the information. So now they've developed a much faster new API for it. It's got a content preview in there, so you can see as it comes up, there's some description. You can add an icon and an image, I think. And there you've got a copy to clipboard button, just small things, but again, it's sort of evolving the UI. And yeah, as I said, there's a brand new API for sharing custom shortcuts, which are kind of direct links into your app, which come up here. And another great blog from Joe Birch. He's done loads of stuff on Android Q. So if you go to his blog, you'll find lots of examples there. And a great Google I/O talk. Notifications. again, I said at the start more notifications because they've just been changing this over and over and over again. But I always try and look on the positive side because it's an evolution. So they're always trying to, as you know, you get thousands of notifications a day. They're always popping up. So it's a kind of, this is a kind of way of trying to prioritise them and not make them sort of take over your experience. So they split them into two sections. So you've got priority notifications in this top section, then you've got gentle notifications in the bottom section. And the obvious question is, what takes priority? So the apps can request high or max priority, which they say to use sparingly. But I mean, they're just going to ignore that, aren't they? Max everything.
Facebook right there.
What's that, sorry?
You've got a Facebook friend request right there, and you said use sparingly.
Yeah, I know. These big corporations are just going to go, yeah, let's just thrash it to within an inch of its life. But hopefully OS heuristics is going to save us, because there's some intelligence behind it where it tries to put the priority ones, like essential device function, communication from people, events alarms, in that section. And the saving grace is, this is a running theme through some new versions of Android, is the user always gets the final say. So you can long press on these notifications and say, okay, Facebook, get down bottom. I don't want to hear about it. Or you could just uninstall it. That's what I've done. That's the advice. So notification actions is another small tweak. Again, this is quite a Google thing. They've read the notification and they've put some intelligent canned responses at the bottom, and things like, you know, if there's an address in there, you can open maps directly. Yeah, that could be very useful. And the Bubbles API, I thought this was quite interesting to highlight. There used to be, there is an existing API which allows you to bring things up over the top of all other apps. And you've probably seen it with examples like Link Bubble and various other sort of sidebars that are in Android. And that uses this system alert window, which has some privacy concerns, as Scott will tell you, in that you have like a transparent overlay on the top of all your apps. So in theory, you could be in one app and there'd be a transparent overlay over the top, and you could be inputting data into another app. So I think the intention was good when they announced it, but obviously I think they've made some restrictions over time to circumvent this, but now they're going to depreciate it completely, and they've got this new Bubbles API, which is usually the main use case for this kind of UI feature. So developer preview at the moment, so you can only switch it on in settings, but yeah, this is roughly UI, so it probably looks familiar to you, like Facebook use that as well, and then just drag down to dismiss, and there's an example at the bottom. So quickly on to Jetpack. So we've got just view bindings, compose, view pager 2, as I said, loads of updates. Just a quick one on view bindings. There's several different ways to bind views in Android. You've got Butterknife, you've got Kotlin synthetics. This is another way, but they're proposing that this is kind of the best of the bunch. It's sort of based on data binding, but the difference is that you don't need to wrap your layouts in the layout tag to get the bindings. So you just initiate it like this, and it generates all the view IDs from your XML, and then you're off to the races. So yeah, that's interesting. Jetpack Compose. So this is effectively the same as Swift UI. It's a declarative UI toolkit. So it's a lot of comparisons to it. It's along the same lines. As you can see from this example, you've kind of got elements of the UI that you just render in code completely, and it's all based in Kotlin, and it leverages the functions of Kotlin, like lambdas, etc. to make it easier to define these elements in the UI. One of the biggest things which is different to Swift UI is that they've made this unbundled, so it's part of the Android X libraries. So the great advantage of that is that you don't have to wait for updates. You don't have to sort of wait until your users are on a certain API level. You can get updates straight away, and it's currently in. This is my next point. Warning: it's in pre-alpha, so they've announced it, but it's very early stages. So I mean, to test it, you need to install this Android X toolchain, which is just downloading some code from GitHub and then pointing your Android Studio to it. And yeah, I mean, it looks promising. Same as Swift UI, it's a great way, a different way of looking at UI, decoupling your state. Historically in Android, it's always been a problem where the view is holding on to some of the state. So yes, that's amazing. Go and have a look at the links. View Pager 2 is another good one. This is the paging of different screens that Control use on Android, and previously there's been some pain points in its implementation. So this is based on the list view implementation that we've got in Android called Recycler View. Which means you can have the same sort of adapter implementation, which has got data binding advantages and data set change notifications. And again, this is still in development. It's in Alpha 5, but there's loads and loads of really nice features coming to it. So please use that if you're on Android X. Camerax library. I told you I packed it in, didn't I? This is only halfway. No jokes. So we've got device-specific implementations. Implementing cameras in apps on Android has always been really painful. I did try and do one at one point and ended up using a sort of a library abstraction on top of one of the versions. There's been 2 versions before this, I think, something like that. So this is. But the difference with this implementation is they've gone out with to manufacturers and they've tested this on real devices, because there always used to be like edge cases where you get Samsung and it wouldn't rotate correctly and the preview wouldn't work. So yeah, so this is much more fully featured. There's even extensions from manufacturers, so things like night mode, HDR, which are sort of Google Pixel features. You can intercept the images that are coming in the API and manipulate them and analyze them, so it's amazing. So just to the last bit on Jetpack is there's a few other libraries. As I said, this is all to do with accelerating developer work. So there's a new preferences library. The other one is depreciated if you're using Android X, so that's great. Worker Manager is for async background tasks, just went stable, which is a great sort of, it kind of allows battery management and takes care of all the kind of best practices for doing async background tasks. Navigation. This is a new concept from Android where it's taking care of the flow of your navigation in your app, which is never done before. People were always left to sort of roll their own on Android, so this is Google's attempt to address that, so that's 2.0. We've got things like View Model now, which is a proper Android X thing, and there's save state in there, which is another addition which allows stored values to survive process death. So before you used to handle that in activities, but now it's kind of abstracting that out, bringing it back into the view model. So again, good for separation concerns. New is benchmark 1.0 benchmarking, so that's another interesting one worth checking out, just for testing the performance of your app. And then we've got coroutines, which is like the new hot thing in Android, comes out of Kotlin. It's a new way of doing asynchronous work. So now Kotlin is like the huge thing in Android. So they're integrating things like coroutines into all these tools that they're providing for developers. And another great talk if you've got loads of time on your hand. Other stuff I just wanted to highlight was Android Studio. It always used to be a problem. When Android Studio first came out, they were developing loads and loads of new features for it, and it was brilliant because from the Eclipse days, this was just like a breath of fresh air for us. But it got to a point where performance started to become a problem. So now they're changing their focus back onto performance, which is great for us developers on bigger projects. And we've got Instant Run becomes apply changes. Instant Run was something that they tried to do to sort of speed up that the sort of development life cycle where you'd compile and build and push it to an emulator. So they've learned some lessons from that first iteration, and now they've got applied changes. So in theory, they could combine that with some of the new Jetpack Compose stuff, and could be close to what Swift UI are doing, but better. And then we've got in-app updates. This is another great API. We've tried to implement something like this in Just Eat, but this is like the official supported one. So it's a kind of a nice API, so you can push forced updates into your app. So if there's a critical bug, you can get it out there, and there's two different ways of doing it. So like a background way, or a kind of forced full screen way. So if you really want every user to get your bug fix, and you can do that. Again, Joe Birch, legend. Go to his blog. He's exploring all these features in Q. And lastly, the settings sheet. This is quite useful. So if you're in an app and you don't want to go back out to the settings, there's various ones that you can pull up just as a bottom sheet, just to quickly change something. So that's great. And that's it. Summary: dark theme, gesture navigation, share sheet, smart notifications, Bubble API, all the Jetpack stuff, which is amazing, and in-app updates, benchmark and share sheet, and some resources if you haven't had enough. Go here, read some stuff. What's new in Android? Any similarities to my talk? Completely coincidental. Android developer blog, that's all the things I've been talking about. And you've got Jetpack Compose, which I recommend watching because that's really, really interesting and still evolving. And then you've got a blog post of links, believe it or not, for every Google I/O talk. So any topic you want to refresh on, go there. Thanks, Chet. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you.